Hello and welcome to Rock Paper Shotgun. The sight of a hero tumbling into Baldur's Gate 3's Underdark is a useful visual metaphor for this video, as we plunge once again into the game's systems. This is Matthew and I'm thrilled to bring you part 2 of my massive interview with Baldur's Gate 3's lead systems designer Nick Pechenin. As well as living in what looks like that weird room from 2001: A Space Odyssey, Nick is responsible for translating 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons into the rules and systems we get to use in the game. In our first interview we talked a lot about combat and stealth, and today we're looking at loads of stuff from spells to character leveling and chatting about alcohol and death along the way. You can see everything we discussed as chapters along the video timeline, but I'd love it if you watch the whole thing as Nick has lots of fascinating stuff to say. And if the mic is a bit crackly, please do zap on subtitles. If you enjoy our Baldur's Gate 3 videos, please do give them a like and subscribe so you don't miss any going forward. We raise a tankard of goblin ale to all that do. Ours isn't poisoned though. Honest. Anyway, let's just get on with the interview.
Oh, you were tempted, were you? Interesting. What grabbed you exactly? His parlor tricks? His manners? His lavish spread, even? You must have found something alluring to overlook the fact that he was a devil.
Another thing I thought was interesting was that you've included the inspiration points on the rerolls. How do you earn those inspiration points? In D&D, they're kind of rewarded more kind of creatively, I guess. I'm just interested how that translates.
So in tabletop, indeed, it's a tool for DM to reward creative and inventive play in character. Role play. For us, we know that our writers and scripters tend to come up with like really crazy ways to solve some situations. Well, I really don't want to spoil some of them, but suffice to say, it's gonna be for players who are brave enough to click on some dialogue options that lead to some dark or hilarious. There's not gonna be a lot of them per act, so they're gonna be pretty precious. But we also allow you to accumulate more than one.
Okay.
So
cool.
I think there is a really big and heavy choice where you can figuratively sell your soul, but get quite a bunch of them.
Oh, nice. Will you still get those moments in the game where like the dice rolls just aren't on your side in like combat and you just get like completely wiped really quickly? I don't know if it's a fond memory of the original Baldur's Gate games, but I spent a lot of time kind of loading and saving. I feel like they were relatively punishing, especially at that lower level when you're kind of finding your feet. Can that stuff still happen in Baldur's Gate 3?
Yeah, indeed. On lower level, we feel like the player has a bit less room for error, and so we're looking into a tutorial experience that will kind of gradually introduce to these concepts without putting you into kind of unfair danger. What 5th edition also does is that because they introduce advantage and disadvantage, which means you can improve your chances on any particular roll. What we did is add kind of systemic sources of advantage that you can go for almost in any situation. So if you are if you're on a high ground, your ranged attacks always have an advantage, so things like that. And we try to make sure that in the early fights, it's relatively easy to pick up on the tutorial messages, to pick up on the clues on how to get those advantages and kind of slant the odds in your favor somewhat. And we also try to get you to like level 2 as quickly as possible so that you're not as squishy as wizards are on level 1, where like one bad crit from a goblin can just end the game for you.
Yeah.
Right there.
Are you talking about the kind of level cap on the whole game yet, or is that a known thing?
We're kind of trying to size the amount of content that we have to put in, and that we're able to put in at high enough quality. But for the entire game, it hasn't been set in stone so far. We just know that it's a massive amount of things to come up with, and the higher you go in levels, the harder it gets. So you get closer to spells like Wish, where you go like, what do we do? Do we accept emails from people with their wishes and just quickly patch the game? So we have to do a lot more thinking about what would be exciting and reasonable things that the DM would let you do with these kinds of spells and high-level creative kind of features that classes get.
Yeah, because I think one of my memories of the original Baldur's Gate games was quite slow leveling, so it really felt meaningful when it happened. I think it was quite a sort of precious part of those games.
It is indeed less of a kind of exponential increase that you would see in Divinity games, for example, or in some other RPGs. It is spaced out, and so every upgrade is a lot more meaningful. But also, what we already see is that because you get to spend a bit more time on every level, this means that the content that we have, kind of situations, combats, they can be tailored a lot more specifically to what we expect the player to have at this moment, and for you to have like a lot smoother experience going through them, because we don't have to guess like, oh no, the player could have 100 damage, or they could have 300 damage if they were did the situation in a different order.
We also saw in this particular demo that you infiltrated the camp, and there were some enemies that had like a slightly drunk status.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Is drunkenness and alcohol a system in this game?
If you drink from an alcoholic bottle, you do get drunk, and this has stats advantages and disadvantages. I think it improves. It gives you disadvantage on intelligence, I think, and maybe gives you advantage on dexterity. Don't quote me on this, but something along those lines. And I think it's still the case that if you drink too much, you fall asleep. But the specific situation that you're describing, that's the party going on at the Goblin Camp?
Yeah.
So that's just them periodically kind of filling up on booze there and all being slightly drunk.
That's great. And also in this demo, like, we've seen a lot of attack spells and quite a few kind of like physical abilities, like the feather fall. I'm interested, like, are you still trying to kind of include like more sort of social magics as well? Things like deceiving people, because I feel like those kind of spells, again, like the stealth, have been kind of underrepresented in the past. I mean, are you trying to get all the spells in?
We're certainly trying to get all of the spells that we can implement within reason in the system. There are spells to improve your chances in dialogues, both buffs for yourself and also things you can cast on the characters in advance, like friends and things like that. So there's quite a few spells that we can do just because we have roles within the dialogue, and also we have the options that are tied to the tags on your character, some kind of traits. So we have this opportunity to make spells that put tags on you and can change dialogue for you, or that change your chances in intimidation, persuasion, in kind of a generic way that would work in dialogues, outside of dialogues, and anything in between.
Yeah, oh, that's cool. I also thought the original Baldur's Gate games, they had some spells that were just like a huge waste of everyone's time. I'm thinking particularly colour spray, which I always thought was just a total, absolutely duff. How do you kind of keep all spells relevant here? Just do things not make the cut because you feel like they're too similar to something else, or is that just not the case?
We do prioritize the spells that bring something new to the table, or that we think are going to be more popular. So of course when you have 450 or 500 spells and features to go through, you will prioritize things that have the most impact. Color spray is actually quite good, at least in this edition. We do have it working already. It's very punchy. That's something to do. But when we see that the spell, like you say, is probably going to be a waste of everyone's time, we try to think of something specific to our game that we can tweak in it that is going to make it more interesting. So we already tweak the distances and areas of most spells, just because since we're working with a very specific top-down camera and then very specific kind of world environment where we know all of the dimensions, there are some ranges and area sizes that are just more comfortable to work with. You see them well on the screen, you can reason about them, nobody shoots you from outside of your field of vision. So we already have to kind of tweak those, and some of the spells are saved by this. And then others become more interesting because we still have some of the elemental interactions, and so even the weakest fire spell is capable of igniting a smoke powder barrel. and doing like a lot of noise very very suddenly.
That's cool. Are there any particular like class or race kind of abilities that like bespoke things that you're particularly kind of excited for people to see?
It's really fun to see Githyanki jumping around with their psionics. We are working on Hellish Rebuke, I believe, is a name for the reaction spell that Tieflings will get. I really hope it's going to make it in the EA. It's really fun to kind of blast someone with fire in the face for hitting you.
Can halflings hide behind other enemies in battle?
Well, we're trying to figure out how to make stealth easier for them around big targets, but it's a little harder because we're not going for the cover system per se, as it's described in the books. So our cover is mostly related to just binary, can the enemy see you or not, and the light and darkness. Mostly because from the top-down camera, it's a lot harder to judge. Is it 3/4? Is it half blocked? It's very hard to see, like, if I move there, what will enemies think about me? Some games do it with a grid, but we really like to keep off the grid. It gives the game this natural feel. The environments don't have to adjust to a specific grid where you would be able to say, like, this square has half cover from that side. And so because we don't have that kind of forcing it on, it didn't work so well in our prototypes.
Right, and it's interesting there, you mentioned a reaction. Could you talk a little bit about how reactions work in the game? Because am I right in thinking you sort of set a reaction that you want to take now? Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Reactions were a big topic of discussion of how to do them. They're kind of like a topic that illustrates very well that sometimes you have to target the feelings that the rules are trying to induce in the players instead of trying to follow the rules letter by letter. Right. So what we see is that 5th edition is D&D is amazing tabletop social experience, and one way they create the excitement of action is that they push most of the decisions that players can do that cost them some resource or go on cooldown. They push those decisions as close as possible to the very last moment when they can be done. So, for example, something like Battlemaster maneuvers, the fighter maneuvers, their wording would say when you attack some creature, and only if you hit, you can decide that your attack was actually a pushing attack all along. This works for the player because when combat starts, action is kind of in this like slow motion phase, and you create it in your head, and it's very easy to say like, oh yeah, this was a menacing attack all along, but I came up with it after starting the attack. But in the player's head it still works because it's all kind of in your imagination, and it's all looking cool and looks like an action game. But then when you have an actual 3D world that you just look at and it's there, we still want to keep the push and attack or menace attack visually distinct from all other attacks, and we don't want to pause all of the action and kind of give you a pop-up, would you like to use menace and attack, yes or no? Because while it's correct by the rules, the actual kind of physical experience that the player gets is that it's not a quick reaction that they had in the middle of combat. Instead, it's kind of like a drudgery decision where you have to read a bunch of text and you stare at UI instead of seeing action take place in a real environment. And so we were thinking how to keep the depth behind reactions and the tactical opportunities that they give you, while kind of keeping the action flowing and keeping the action close to the picture that you have in your head when you're playing a tabletop.
Right.
And our current idea is to let the player on their turn to say which reactions they want to trigger and which they don't. So Wizard will disable their attack of opportunity because it's probably not going to do a lot of damage, but they're going to enable some spells that they have. Battlemaster will enable repost and things like that, and you can decide, do I want to enable it? Do I want to spend resources on this or not? But we're also looking into how we could give players even more control over when exactly this happens. But we don't really want to go into like just telling the player, oh, just script your own with visual language. It's probably going to be overkill. So we're still kind of figuring out that part.
And I also wondered about how the game handles death. I've seen like a resurrection scroll bring a kind of character back to life. Is that like the only means of bringing someone back, or is like death quite punishing? Because again, in the original Baldur's Gate games, it was quite a pain to have a dead companion. Like, you cost loads to bring them back to life, for example.
That is still our target. So because we're still in very active development, we have to spread around a bit more resurrection scrolls than we would probably have in the finished game, just so that it's easier to test, it's easier to see the intended experience from the first go. But eventually what we see is that because of the system where a player character that goes to 0 HP, they don't die immediately, instead they go into the special mode where they can still survive and other player characters can help them up. This brings down the actual lethality of combat quite a bit. So in a lot of combats, a couple of your guys will go into down state, but then you'll win the combat, you'll get them up, and so it's going to be less hassle. And in this environment, we do want to have death count a bit more, and not to go into details of the plot, but you will have a bit of a special relationship with death and bringing your party members back to life. But I wouldn't say that we have a very set in stone rules for how that would work. It's just that you will have to definitely get to the corpse. Where it happened, we will make you kind of really interact with that corpse, but the cost, this is something we're talking about still.
I'm also interested about short rests and long rests. If you could maybe explain the difference for people who don't know, where they kick in and what two roles they sort of serve.
The difference there is that long rest is you really go into sleep. So you go in unconscious, you're usually in a very safe environment. In this case, in our case, it's going to be your camp most of the time. And during this long rest, not only you completely refresh your character, you also have an opportunity to change up your skill set, your spells that are prepared right now, and we're currently planning to put the level up and all the decisions that have to do with level up also in this phase, where during long rest you kind of ruminate on what happened during the whole day, and this is what makes you kind of grow as a character. Whereas short rest is really you taking a breather between battles, maybe bandaging yourself up a little bit. Short rest will restore a little bit of your HP using the hit dice rules, and for some classes it's going to restore kind of tactical resources that they have. Right. Originally we were planning to have a kind of an implicit short rest that would just automatically apply all of those rules after every encounter. Right. But we saw that as we implement more and more features that kind of go into higher level territory, it is important that short rest is a resource. So we want to have a cap on how many you can do between long rests. Currently at 2, I think.
You can't just spam short rests, because I wondered if it was just sort of replacing bedroll from Divinity Original Sin 2, where it almost felt like any trouble you got into, you could just sort of start tapping away on bedroll and it would solve all manner of problems.
Yeah, here your your decisions about your resources, they have a bit more weight, especially if you're in a dangerous territory like you saw Sven going into the spider caves to reach the Underdark. A lot of that zone is kind of set up as a danger zone where you cannot just teleport out and walk off all of your injuries. So you have to rely on these short bursts of here's a little help to make sure that you're not completely dying in the next fight. But your decisions stay with you for at least as long as you push forward.
I also had a question about the, I can't remember the exact name of it, the kind of pause mode, the sort of turn-based world.
We're internally just calling it turn-based mode, or
right.
Forced turn-based mode, because you kind of make the whole world stop.
One of the things that really jumped out, particularly from this recent demo, was when Sven was playing it on the stream, and you had an ability with a set number that lasted for a set number of turns, and that pause mode really kind of drew that out. I have 8 specific turns. Was that partially kind of created for those kind of situations to make the length of buffs and things feel a bit more meaningful?
It definitely was one of the reasons we went in that direction. We think that it's perfectly fine for a party to kind of pre-buff before an encounter, pick the buffs that they want to put on themselves. But also, a lot of those buffs do need to have a duration, so we can't make them last forever. But we don't want you to run out before kind of getting some use out of them. And so it was very useful when you can just say pause, let me just make all my decisions as if I'm in turn-based, and not let the world just tick away at your resources. It reduces anxiety. You don't have to kind of rush through them, click fast. Just mostly frustration reducing kind of technique there. But really the biggest reason for us to try the turn-based was to help with some puzzles.
Right.
That we want you to go through, and also with stealth.
Yeah.
In stealth, it's extremely useful to make all of the guards pause and to think about how you're going to approach the situation, and also kind of walk past the guards without being like really scared that they will turn around at any second and kind of sweep their sight cone of sight at you. And see you, but at the same time you still have the tension because you don't know what the guards are going to do on their turn. So it's a little bit more structured.
And is that like instanced like around a particular character? Like I'm kind of interested because we saw Lizelle using it to sneak into a camp, but the rest of her team were not in turn-based mode somewhere else. Like if they walked up to her, would they enter turn-based mode? Like how does that work?
We're using rules kind of similar to what we already do with combat. It's that every participant kind of exerts some kind of combat aura around themselves,
right?
Where they pull in entities that would be interested to kind of join. So usually it's in combat it's combatants or hostiles and allies. Mm-hmm. In FTB it's most of the things that can tick. So if you have like a burning crate, it's gonna also enter turn-based mode so that you can you don't have to see it kind of tick away. So this kind of area, it is local, which means that you can totally unchain your party and do something completely different somewhere else, without kind of worrying that your other guys are gonna get in trouble or that they're gonna get detected. It also helps in multiplayer because of course we don't want to have both players kind of like a global pause button because it breaks flow. You want to just keep doing your stuff.
Before I ask my last question, what's like the weirdest, like most bespoke rule that you guys have like implemented that you're like really happy you managed to get in the game?
There are quite a few very specifically worded rules in D&D. Protection fighting style, I think. That's one of the craziest things that we had to do. So we very quickly realized that things that are easy to kind of write on in a book in D&D rules and that are easy to like tweak there can be very, very, very hard to explain to a computer in a way that is doable at like 60 frames per second. And so something like fighting style protection that has a pretty complicated description even when just read in the book. When a creature you can see attacks a target other than you that is within 5 feet of you, you can use your reaction to impose a disadvantage on the attack roll. You must be wielding a shield. So something like that, where you have to kind of you have to attach a rule to a specific character, but you're reasoning about two more entities. That is like very hard for a computer to wrap their heads around, especially in a way that doesn't make them check every single character and their friends in like entire world every frame. Like, do you have the protection? Does the rule apply to you? Things like that are very complicated, and so I really feel for our gameplay coder team that go like, guys, can you write it any different way? We're like, well, sorry, that's the point. There's a specific thing they're trying to achieve where you feel safe standing next to someone with this feature, and so we have to kind of figure out how to do this.
That's wild. That's wild. I guess for my last question, I'm actually interested, like, you obviously are involved with so many elements of this game because it's so systems driven, but I'm interested in what interests you outside of the bits of the game that you have a direct involvement in. Which elements of the game are you personally like most excited to see from like other members of the team?
To be honest, I have an interest in pretty much like a finger in every pie, and an interest in everything that we're trying to push for in this project. It's very cool to see the cinematics team come up with cinematic language for what we're doing, and also the writers to find a voice that is very unique for BG3. I enjoy immensely going through dialogues these days, now that we really got to where we want them to be in terms of quality, but also pacing, and all the little things start to fall into place. But also, as like a tech nerd, I'm very excited to see visual effects teams, technical animation teams build up like these incredible tools that allow them to do like very fluid animations that can take care of things that we've thought were impossible before, like dual wielding and multi-attacking for VFX. Something you haven't even seen in the demo, but we already saw that they just got their hands on a piece of really cool tech that hopefully will show off very soon. But I'm very excited to hear what players think about it. But to me, the visual effects that they're coming up with right now, they're both harking back to like the older games, but also feel really cutting edge. And so I'm very excited about kind of the growth that we have in every department is really pushing for it. Like our schedule suffers, and our producers go like, guys, you want everything, and now. But it's very cool to see after years of work to see most of the pieces start coming together, and you go like, wow, that actually works like we wanted it, and people are excited about it. That's great.
That's awesome. Well, like I said, can't wait to play it in August, maybe. Fingers crossed. Can't wait to see a really good rogue. That's what I'm excited about.
We're working very hard, and I hope you will like it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking to us, Nick. I really appreciate that.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Thanks again to Nick for breaking down this Baldur's Gate 3 gameplay in so much detail. If you didn't catch the first part of our interview, please do take a look at that one, as there's loads of interesting stuff in it, and I really hope to bring you a lot more on Baldur's Gate 3 over the coming months, so why not subscribe to Rock Paper Shotgun and turn on channel notifications so that those videos whiz their way straight to you. There should be some examples on screen right now, and why not start with those, and it'll be time for the August early access before you know it. Thanks so much for watching, and hopefully see you again soon. Bye for now.